Welcome to the Candice Malcolm Show. My name is Kris Sims. I'm the Alberta Director for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, sitting in Candice's chair for the next few days. Thank you so much for making us a part of your new week. If you haven't done so yet, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and most importantly, share it with your friends. Now, this kind of slipped under the radar, and I really think it's important for all of our Juno News viewers to know what's going on. Prime Minister Mark Carney had jetted over to England on Friday, and he was at some big fancy mucky muck globalist summit called the Global Progress Action Summit. Now, that sounds kind of boring, but it's really important that we pay attention to this stuff because this is where all of these jet-setting politicians get together, and it's kind of like high school, but with your money and a lot of power over you. And they get together and they start chit-chatting and they start trying to one-up each other on stuff like banning the sale of normal gasoline and diesel-powered vehicles. If somebody were from British Columbia or Vancouver, for example, they'd probably be bragging about the fact that they're banning new homes being built with natural gas furnaces in them. Yeah, check that out in Vancouver. So it's summits like these where these terrible, expensive, big government ideas are hatched. So it's super important for us to pay attention to them. I have a clip here for you, okay? It is Mark Carney, Prime Minister of Canada, who just so happens to be on stage with the Prime Minister of the UK, Keir Starmer. This is just after Keir Starmer made his big announcement that made big news about digital ID in England, in his country. Now, what Carney says here is super important. You have to listen to the whole thing. It's about a minute long, and he chit-chats about Karl Marx a little bit, so keep listening. At the very end, he calls carbon taxes textbook good policy. Listen to this.
The reality of what you inherited, going 15 years without real wages, without people getting ahead. Like the last time that happened was the middle of the 19th century. Karl Marx was writing the Communist Manifesto in the British Library. I mean, there's a connection there. So you got to deliver real wage growth first and foremost. And so similar to in Australia, slightly different measures. First thing we did is we cut taxes for the middle class. We cut taxes for 22 million Canadians. Boom, right away. First thing we did, we cut a tax for effectively for young Canadians when they're buying their first time home. Cut taxes on carbon, which was also the direct carbon tax, which had become a divisive issue. It was in textbook a good policy, but a divisive issue. So,
do you hear that? Textbook good policy. Now, the reason I'm trying to hammer this thing home is twofold. One, Mark Carney loves carbon taxes. Like here, I've got his book here. He wrote an entire book, okay, praising carbon taxes, like global carbon taxes. So, one, Carney still loves carbon taxes. And you notice how he kind of looked a little bit apologetic there in front of all of his little progressive friends on the stage? He had to kind of account for that. So he still loves carbon taxes, and he's going to hit us with new ones. He said so, to be fair, he said so out loud during the election campaign. He said he wasn't going to axe the tax, which he found funny. He's going to change the carbon tax. So right now we're in kind of a lull. We're kind of in a phony war moment right now because he did get rid of the consumer carbon tax. That's why typically it's about 20 cents cheaper per liter of gasoline on average in most gas stations across Canada than it was a year ago. So it's gone, but he's still cooking up the new industrial carbon tax. And the new industrial carbon tax is going to be a big one. How big? Well, it was big enough for the steel workers and the pipe workers trade unions to be so worried about it for their steel plants in Hamilton that they endorsed the Conservatives during the last election. That was the first time I've ever seen something like that. So the industrial carbon tax, it's coming. They're still cooking it, and it's coming. Second, the other reason I wanted to really hammer this home is because, like I said, it's at globally summits where they all get together and they eat beef carpaccio and canapes and stuff all on your dime. Okay. It's at these summits where bad ideas start. And one of the original bad ideas was carbon taxes. Now, Conservative leader and opposition leader Pierre Poilievre, he took a little bit of heat about a month or so ago when he came out and said, yeah, we're going to keep fighting carbon taxes. Thank you very much. That's the right thing to do. And I would say some of the newer kind of online influencers in this sphere, the ones who are arguing for more freedom and smaller government, they're like, oh, that was the last campaign. Why are you talking about carbon taxes? No, 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 no. No, no. If you care about big government controlling your life and making you poor and saying that you have to eat this or heat with this or drive this, carbon taxes are the OG of government control. This all started way back. They were chatting about this at the Rio summits. If you don't know what that is, Google it, look it up. So Pierre Poilievre is absolutely right to continually fight carbon taxes. And Mark Carney is just waiting to hit us with new ones. It's going to be an industrial carbon tax. And keep in mind, he's still hanging on to carbon tax tariffs. He calls them border adjustment mechanisms. What that means is this. Mark Carney looks around the world, okay, like you can see right on the front of his book here, okay? That's the planet with scaffolding around it because they're going to fix it, of course, for all of our benefit. He looks around the world. He finds a country that doesn't have a carbon tax, like a national carbon tax, and that upsets him. That upsets Mark Carney so much that when an import comes into Canada from one of those big bad countries with no federal carbon tax, he's going to slap a tariff on that stuff. Yeah, he said so during the election campaign that this is his plan. He doesn't put it that way. He cloaks it in newspeak and calls it a border adjustment mechanism. Okay, that's a carbon tax tariff. Okay, so it's really important for folks to pay close attention when the Prime Minister jets off to something. Now, most of the mainstream media will cover it in like, oh, a happy, yay, isn't this neat, fluffy, he's going to a rugby game, blah, blah, blah. That's fine. It's okay to enjoy nice things, but ask yourself what the real purpose of a lot of these meetings are. And it's exactly stuff like this. It's being an apologist for carbon taxes and cooking up new plans to control your life. And carbon taxes, remember, dictate what kind of vehicle you can drive, what you can heat your home with, and how expensive food is, because it hits trucking. Speaking of expensive, the federal government is broke. We are out of money. We are in a major debt crisis, and the Parliamentary Budget Officer is sounding the alarm. But first, let's listen to a quick message from our sponsor.
Look, folks, it's time to modernize Canada's rules on nicotine. Alternatives to cigarettes, like heated tobacco, vaping products, and oral smokeless products, don't burn tobacco or produce smoke. They aren't risk-free, but the growing body of scientific evidence shows that they have the potential to be substantially less harmful than smoking. Despite this, Canadians are banned access to critical information and even some products. Nicotine pouches remain banned in convenience stores, and current laws ban communication about the risks of these products compared to cigarettes. It's unbelievable. The evidence is here. The tools exist. Canadians should have the freedom to know. You can learn more by visiting unsmoke.ca.
Okay, so the Parliamentary Budget Officer, Jason Jacques, he's the interim Parliamentary Budget Officer. So let's hope he's able to keep his job. The interim Parliamentary Budget Officer made a lot of headlines last week, and he did a great job at committee. That's where he was saying that the amount of spending going on here and the deficit that he was estimating based on the numbers he has right now was stupefying. So you probably saw that clip last week. But what you probably didn't see was an excellent interview that he did on CPAC. And I wanted to bring this to you, or the team here at Juno wanted to bring this to you, because he says something really important. You might hear some of the spin coming from the federal government of, oh, this budget is going to be super crazy, ugly, bad because of Donald Trump. Listen to this.
If left unchanged, the fiscal path that the government's currently on will definitely result in us being in quite a bit of trouble and having to make some hard decisions.
Now, In getting here, what do you attribute this to? Is this like Donald Trump's trade policies, the roosters coming home to nest, or is this about government spending priorities and not controlling it?
I think it's kind of a little bit from column A and a little bit from column B. So there definitely is an impact in comparison to our previous forecast. You can definitely see the impact on the overall growth for the Canadian economy. A larger part of it is the government policy decisions.
So once again, that was interim Parliamentary Budget Officer Jason Jacques, and he's mild-mannered, as a lot of spokespeople in Ottawa are, but he popped that bubble there that was coming from the host. These are not the chickens coming home to roost. This is just really bad fiscal policy. Because what about before Donald Trump? Oh, was that because of the lockdowns and COVID? Okay, well, what about before that? Because before any of the crazy stuff happened in 2020, before the lockdowns, before businesses were destroyed, largely by government diktat, in 2018, 2019, the federal government, under then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, spent more money than in any one year of the Second World War, adjusted for population and inflation. I know, it's crazy. I'm going to say that again real slow. So remember back in the sunny ways times of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau when he said the budget will balance itself? And we're going to balance the budget by 2019, like Scout's honor, no problem. He never balanced the budget, not even one time, okay? And in 2018, 2019, the fiscal year before 2020, they spent more money than our government did during the Second World War, adjusted for inflation. So this government does not really have a US President Donald Trump problem. If they truly believed that, they would be earnestly doing everything they can to get a new trade deal with that person. Because, yeah, Canadians are suffering because of this. Because they're refusing to actually get in there and hammer out a trade deal, and they'd rather take potshots on TV to score points with their reporter friends. Normal working people in Canada, and frankly, plenty of people in the United States, are being hurt by this. And we just don't have the money to withstand this. We are now $1.2 trillion in debt, which is what Jason Jacques was sounding the alarm bell about. Put another way, the interest that we are paying on the federal debt is $1 billion a week. Picture a brand new hospital, all done, all shiny, paint on, everything ready to go. But instead of moving in the doctors and nurses, we burn it down. Burn it down every week. Burn down a new hospital. That's what taxpayers are having to pay with interest on our federal debt. So, folks, it is time for people to really wake up to this debt spiral that we're in right now, because we don't have the money to cover stuff like this. Speaking of not having the money, there's something that is happening right now that is going to cost taxpayers a ton of money. And that is the so-called buyback program for firearms owners. Now, before you say, oh, I'm not a gun owner and I don't care and it's a crime thing. No. Okay. Number one, they might be coming after people's firearms right now, but they could be coming after your pickup truck tomorrow, like real easy. So this is a private property issue. Two, this is going to cost the so-called buyback program a ton of money, okay? Experts are guessing anywhere from like $1 billion with the B to $6 billion with the B. And when they tried this back in the early 90s with the whole long gun registry, they said, oh, no problem, it'll cost $2 million. It wound up costing taxpayers $2 billion. So times 1,000. So we have unmoney. We do not have the money to do this firearms thing. And three, the police themselves say targeting licensed, legal firearms owners is not going to solve crime. This is going to be a huge waste of money and resources. Police do not want to participate in this thing, and it is not going to solve the crime problem. Where do we go from here with this? Let's find out. Joining me now is Devin Drover. He is a friend of mine. He's also the Atlantic Director for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. And most importantly, when it comes to guns, he's our in-house lawyer. He is our legal counsel. Devin, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we're taking an extra step here at the Taxpayers Federation, and I winced on your behalf when you made this announcement last week because you said, here's my email address. If folks are on Cape Breton Island, okay, if you're living there geographically, and you get one of these letters from the federal government, we will find you free legal advice. That is outstanding. As a firearms owner, I know I would find that to be a comfort after I get a letter like that because it's scary. It's scary to hear from the federal government in that way. What exactly are you doing when it comes to free legal advice for firearms owners?
Yeah, exactly. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said it's scary. I know, as a lawyer, I deal with uh, how to say this appropriately, pissing matches with the federal government's lawyers on a regular basis. And I don't think, it's not something as a lawyer it makes me uncomfortable. But when you're not somebody legally trained and you get this strongly worded letter from the federal government, for the RCMP, about taking your personal property, it can be scary. So that's what we're doing at the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. We're offering free legal advice to anyone impacted by the confiscation scheme. So very pleased to do it. Anyone local in Cape Breton Island that's dealing with, threats from the federal government to have their property confiscated can email us at legal_team@taxpayer.com, and you'll hear from me or a member of the team about how to protect your rights.
So that's legal_team, as in join the team, at taxpayer.com. That's the email.
Absolutely. Legal_team@taxpayer.com. If you send an email and you're a resident of Cape Breton being threatened by this confiscation program, we will, myself and the team of lawyers I'm working with on this file, will make sure we get back to you as soon as possible to make sure your rights are protected and that you do not need to comply with the program as is.
Perfect. I wanted to get that in there off the top because I know, some people who are in possession of these firearms right now are really looking for a place to turn. So I wanted to get that on the record right away. I wanted to dig into the issue a little bit as well, though, because I've seen some screw ups at the federal government level. I can't remember the time I've seen an issue like this handled this badly. So we've got experts, okay, like criminology type people saying this is going to cost upwards of $1 billion with a B, which is just a mind-blowing amount of money, warning that this is going to cost a lot of money. We've got police on the front lines, so the ones who are actually representing, guys and girls in blue, saying, this is not going to help the crime problems that we have at the city level. Why are we going after legal firearms owners and not the bad guys with the illegal handguns? And what blows my mind is that we also had the public safety minister, who clearly did not have a grasp on what this program was. What's your assessment of, I would say, the latest incarnation of the federal government handling this right now?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Kris. And it's always funny. We have this administration in Ottawa, this big bloated government in Ottawa, that's always telling us when we raise concerns, well, we have to listen to the experts. Well, the experts aren't telling them that this is a good policy. In fact, everyone is against this. You have you have the Toronto Police Association saying it's going to have zero impact on crime in Toronto. You have Professor King from Mount Royal University saying it won't impact crime rates. The only thing that it is going to impact is, one, the personal property rights of legal firearm owners in this country and us as taxpayers across this country. And yeah, the estimates are insane, Kris. We have, first they told us that it would cost $200 million. Then 2 years later, $300 to $400 million. The government's own Parliamentary Budget Officer is now saying it'll cost $756 million just to purchase the guns. Let's not talk about the administrative bloat that it costs to get anything done in this country at the federal level. And now you have other experts who are putting the total costs at $6 billion as one example. So, this is a rampant abuse of taxpayer dollars, and it's targeting the wrong people. It's not targeting those who are committing crimes using illegal firearms. We're targeting hunters. We're targeting sports shooters. We're targeting law-abiding gun owners in this country, and the program needs to stop.
Yeah, to be very clear, I mentioned it off the top before you joined the show, but for folks who just woke up to this issue, we are not talking about illegal guns. This has nothing to do with illegal guns. So, you know, the folks that you see that are filling the parking lots at Cabela's on the weekends, right? They're buying up all this hunting gear and everything. There are millions of us, okay, who are legal, licensed, law-abiding firearms owners. We have to go through a safety course. All of our backgrounds are checked all the time. Like, the RCMP phones all of your exes to make sure that you're not a crazy person before you're allowed to have a license for a firearm here in Canada. It's those folks with their firearms that, for some inexplicable reason, the federal government is going after. And before people say, oh, well, those guns are dangerous, the Trudeau government announced this back in 2020. It's now 2025. So those same firearms owners have been hanging on to those things in their gun safes for 5 years. And there hasn't been rampant violence on the streets being committed by licensed firearms owners. I'm laughing because the whole thing is just so absurd. I wanted to play a quick clip here. And kudos to the Toronto Police Association. I know that police are hesitant to say stuff that will be interpreted as being political. They just want to keep their head down and do their jobs. But it's really important that the Toronto Police Association is speaking up on this, basically saying this is going to cost a lot of money, waste resources, and it's not going to solve the crimes on the street. This is Clayton Campbell at committee in Ottawa. Let's listen.
The bottom line, the City of Toronto is the gun buyback program would not have any impact on the violence we're seeing in the city. The violence we're seeing in relation to firearm offenses is essentially exclusively to a small number of gang members, thugs using illegal firearms, most of the time that come across the border. About 90% of the 700 illegal firearms we seized last year came across the border. And most of the time people on bail or are prohibited from using a firearm.
Amazing. Like, you couldn't have said it more clearly on this show. Devin, what's your take on the public safety minister? Because this is what kind of really had me cluing into this harder, saying, wow, you guys are really screwing this up. Famously, before the summer break, Andrew Lawton, former host here on Juno News and its predecessor, True North, he started quizzing the public safety minister, saying, okay, what's a PAL, possession and acquisition license? What's the safety course that firearms owners have to take? And he famously said, this doesn't have anything to do with legal firearms owners, which was amazing because that's all this is about. And now we've recently heard him on a recording when he didn't know he was being recorded, basically saying, if I had to do this all over again, I wouldn't do this. And this is kind of a big mistake. What's your take on his handling of this file so far? Do you think this will be the ability to get rid of it? It might help us get rid of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very clear that the public safety minister in Ottawa has absolutely no idea about this program and absolutely no idea how to solve the issues facing public safety. You know, as we see in that clip, the problems with in Toronto, for example, in crime is not law-abiding gun owners. It is limited to gang activity and illegal firearms brought over the border. It is not my father moose hunting in Newfoundland and Labrador is not a criminal. And this government instead is treating them like one with this ban. So, I think it's very clear that he's in over his head on this file. It's very clear that this program needs to be scrapped. If, in the idea that, if he had his time back, he would do it different. The time is still here. We're still under an amnesty period where the firearm owners are legally allowed to keep these firearms in their homes. They do not need to comply with the confiscation their trial that's taking place in Cape Breton right now. And it's real telling to me, and this is bothersome as an Atlantic Canadian, because I think this government takes advantage of Atlantic Canadians sometimes in their support for them. And I think it's telling to me that the public safety minister is announcing this trial of this confiscation regime in Cape Breton Island, but wouldn't even go to Cape Breton to announce it. They did it from they hid in an Ottawa press room to tell legal, law-abiding gun owners in Cape Breton that they're coming for their property. It is sickening to me as an Atlantic Canadian, and I'm tired of seeing our Atlantic Canadians being treated like this by the federal administration in Ottawa. However, as I've said, we are offering free legal advice for those people. And we're not going to let Cape Breton be a guinea pig for this federal program. We'll encourage resistance legally to make sure that this program cannot roll out across the country.
I wanted to really stress that you're jittering a little bit there with your audio, but I wanted to reinstate what you said there. Quite often, and I've lived in Atlantic Canada. A lot of my family is from there. I agree. The Liberal government, in particular, because they have quite strong support out that way, as they say. I find that they take them for granted. And that they think, oh, well, they're going to be a soft touch. We're just going to do this little pilot project there where we're seizing their property for no safety reasons. And so that's why I'm really glad that we're stressing two things. Don't freak out if you get one of these letters in the mail, okay? And two, this is so important, and he barely mentioned this, but it's true. We have another year. We have another year of amnesty. So even if you have one of these firearms, okay, some of which, by the way, folks who are watching, are like 22s, okay? People call them plinkers here on the prairies, okay? If you have one of them, you still have another year. You have until October of 2026. So that gives us some breathing room and some time to be able to challenge this stuff legally. Devin, I wanted you to touch on something that I'll admit I'm not a lawyer. This part confused me, and I don't know why they keep using this term. So we had Prime Minister Mark Carney tell a podcaster, oh, this program is voluntary. It's voluntary. And then we had the public safety minister repeat that word. And so this is, I think it caused a lot of confusion among licensed firearms owners. Do you know what they mean when they keep on saying that the program is voluntary?
Oh, this is such clearly an example of and probably cooked up by some PR experts in Ottawa and Liberal HQ to try to make this program a little more sellable to the general public. It is not voluntary any more than paying your income taxes is voluntary. Yeah, you can choose to do it, or you can choose not to do it and go to jail or face criminal consequences. That's not voluntary to me. No matter how Ottawa wants to put lipstick on a pig here, it is a bad policy, and they're not going to be able to convince law-abiding gun owners to give up their rights by throwing around words like voluntary. It is not voluntary. They are making it a criminal offense to own these firearms that are used for hunting and sports shooting. And that's the bottom line.
That I was trying to give them the benefit of the doubt, thinking they were just incompetent because of what the safety minister had been saying earlier. But when they kept repeating that, I thought, yeah, so the choice is you either comply or you go to prison. That is not a real choice. Frankly, after the last few years, I'm tired of hearing from this government of, oh, it's up to you, but we'll just take everything that you have away from you and or put you in jail if you don't comply. That's voluntary. That doesn't help. That doesn't help people believing in government. That doesn't help people trusting politicians. And it doesn't help, frankly, this law, because it makes it sound really disingenuous and sneaky. If I can, is there a way, do you think, that we can get more people on board with this? Like, I know most of the firearms community, as we would call it, the ones who legally own firearms, they get this. They understand that this is going after hunters and sport shooters. They understand what they have to do. Do you think there's room to bring more moderate people on who may not own firearms or have experience with them, understanding that this, you know what, it could be my 22 today, but it could be your Ford F-150 tomorrow if they want to seize private property? Are we able to go there, do you think, with that argument?
Yeah, I absolutely think so. We're seeing an increasingly more authoritarian regime in Ottawa that is looking at taking your property away or your freedoms away, whether it's your freedom to purchase a vehicle that's gas powered, which you need in vast amounts of this country, or whether it's now your ability to have legal firearms. So, I think it's we need to be making the case, as many people as possible. And that means talking to non-firearm owners about this issue, because it is complicated. If you don't know, if you're in downtown Toronto, never have touched a firearm in your life, and then you hear a little bit about this voluntary, quote unquote, voluntary program, you might think, oh, maybe this is going to help. It's not going to help. And it's very clear from the quote unquote experts that it's not going to help. And it's very clear when you talk to people who actually are law abiding firearm owners in this country that they are not criminals. So, I think we need to be open with people. We need to talk to people. And one of the things I'm really looking forward to is just in a couple days, I'll be on the ground in Cape Breton when this confiscation program officially starts. Myself, other members of the firearms community, some members of parliament who are standing up against this confiscation regime. And I'm looking forward to that, because not only will that rally on the ground there, show that Cape Bretoners are opposed to this, it provides an opportunity for dialogue with other Cape Bretoners who are not aware of the policy, and allows that discourse to happen.
Awesome. Once again, Devin Drover, can you hit us with that email address? So folks, have mercy on Devin for now. Only if you're in Cape Breton, okay? If you're in Cape Breton and you are a legal licensed firearms owner and you're concerned about this program, where can they email you?
Please reach out to us if you have any questions about the confiscation regime. If you get a scary letter or a phone call from government or the RCMP and you need advice on this issue, please email us legal_help@taxpayer.com.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today. Devin Drover, Atlantic Director for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation and our in-house counsel. Once again, folks, two things. One, if you get a letter about this, don't freak out. There are still options. And two, you have another year. There's another year left of amnesty. So they only start actually seizing the firearms and saying, okay, now you have to comply in October of 2026. So there's a lot of runway left in this fight. Folks, this is exactly the reason why you should be a Juno News subscriber, okay? Quite often in the mainstream media, they will talk about things like, oh, the voluntary buyback program. Like Devin just said, if you're some regular person living in downtown Toronto and you're watching TV and you hear a bit of a snippet on the mainstream media and it's the voluntary buyback program for firearms, you might think that this is like, oh, this is one of those things where, when you watch those cop shows on TV in prime time, this is like one of those things where the gangbangers are turning in their firearms in exchange for, gift certificates or something to take guns off the street. They named it this on purpose so that it flies under the radar and normal, earnest people think that this is about fighting crime. It's not. This has got nothing to do with fighting crime. As the head of the Toronto Police Association said, we spoke directly to Clayton Campbell on this very program just a couple of weeks ago, and he said the same thing. That made news, okay? So it's really important that if you want the full story, if you want the other side of the story, that you support independent media like Juno News. So please, if you can, like this video, subscribe to this channel, share it with your friends, and head on over and get a subscription to Juno News.